Thank you for being there despite the corona apocalypse. Actually, my wife allowed me to come only if I promise to wash my hands often. So I try to do so, but I'm not so good at that. So a little bit about me. I am Shaban Shaame. I'm the CEO of Everdreamsoft and producer of the game Spells of Genesis, which is a mobile arcade card game that has blockchain game assets. I'm also a founding member of the Blockchain Game Alliance, which is an alliance of companies that are active into blockchain and gaming. And if you are interested in the field, I invite you to have a look of the group. So before I start, I want to know a little bit more about my crowd. So who of you own collectibles, NFT on blockchain? Okay. Who of you is technical and like to see code and technical stuff on the slide? Okay, and who is more business oriented and like to know more about the market and stuff? Okay, so there is a little bit more of technical people, but I'll try to cover both aspects and trying not to be too technical and but also enough technical. So what I want to talk today is tokenized asset. So we started Spells of Genesis 5 years ago on Counterparty. It's a protocol that was released, it's a token layer that was on Bitcoin, released a little bit before Ethereum mainnet. So it's quite old, and this is the first card we released, the Healing Formula, and it is the first tokenized asset on-chain ever. Since then, the space evolved. We saw Ethereum, CryptoPunks. That was really the first NFT kind of tokens. And today, there are several chains that want to do collectibles, but also multiple sidechain, multiple contract and standard. What I want to explore first is what is it? What is a tokenized asset? What does it mean? What are the challenges of tokenized assets? So when we started with Spells of Genesis, the idea we had is to give true ownership of assets, of the cards or game item that the user have. True ownership is what it means that they own the token in their wallet and nobody can take it from them. So it's unique, they can trade, they can exchange, they can do whatever they want with it. I have to say, going along, we are a game studio, so we made a game, a normal game, I would say, before. And we had fans that came from the previous game, regular player, but also Bitcoin geeks, crypto geeks in general, who came and joined the Spells of Genesis. The true ownership really appealed to the crypto geek, to be completely honest, and the value proposition of saying you're the sole owner of your token really talk to not everybody, but people who were already trading Bitcoin, who knew the technology. So it is a separate crowd, and the value proposition evolve as the time goes. It is not, in my sense, going to fade away, but there different sensibilities. Some people value the fact that things run decentralized. Some people don't care, and that's a reality. There will be more and more people who will interact with decentralized assets, in my opinion. But this will really come with the real value proposition we can give to them in decentralization, not decentralization for the sake of decentralization, but decentralization because they can have another benefit of it. One of those benefits, I believe, of decentralization is allowing anybody to produce token, to produce asset. And that's not really possible right now today. If you create, if you're an artist, it's very hard to bring your stuff into the market. And I believe blockchain decentralization really bring that. So I just want to explore the conception of asset and token because among our community there is a lot of misconception on what does it mean to own something on blockchain. So if you look at Etherscan transaction, I believe most of you, if not all of you, have already been on Etherscan. And on Etherscan, when you have a transaction, this is a token that is transferred. It's a Spells of Genesis card, so one of our cards. And you can see the information, the raw information. So when I made this transaction, did I transact the dragon, the nice image that I had? Or did I transact what? A token? So what does it mean? So if you go to our website or in the game, actually in the game you will see a nice dragon or whatever you own. But in fact, you transacted a token which is a raw data on-chain. So here, I'm not talking about some games are fully decentralized and run completely on blockchain. Here, for Spells of Genesis and my purpose of talk, I will really talk about the ownership, the asset ownership. So you can have a game that runs off-chain, for example, but you activate character if a user owns a certain token, for example. So here, the token at a very simple level. So how I see that is token is like a property title. So when you own a land or a house or something, you have a title on a paper. And if you sell this land, you actually hand out the paper. You are not holding the full land to sell it to someone else, but you just exchange the paper. So on blockchain, what is actually written is the property title of the land. So just like that. For token, it's for tokenized assets, it's almost the same. And there is a lot of misconception. When the kitty, when you have a crypto kitty, what you actually own is a token, a raw information, but the image, the underlying image of the kitty, you don't really own it in a sense, even though it's what we're selling as game developer. But there is a big difference between the underlying asset, the token that you really own, and the image, or whatever it is behind. So you could say, for example, you could store the asset on a decentralized way, for example, on IPFS. So I could produce an image, attach a token, and say, okay, this is the image, this is what you own. But actually, when you do that, even if it's on IPFS, maybe you broke someone's IP. Maybe you didn't have the right to own this image or asset that you provided. So the one who owns the token cannot claim full ownership of the underlying asset. So while the token cannot be duplicated, it's certified, it's truly owned by the user, the asset is something else, and the asset has a different governance. And you need still an authority, just like for a land, an authority that will say, I accept this land to be attached to that specific token. I want this presentation to be a little bit interactive. So if you have any question, or don't hesitate to bring your own input on the question. All right, so monetization. So while we are trying to address this problematic between what's the difference between the asset and the token, we came up with a word, we call it Orb. It's ownership read on blockchain. That's an abstract word that we are using. And we try to define the relation between the token and the asset. One of the examples here is one of our most expensive card in Spells of Genesis, 200 units, only 200 units of Satoshi card, which lies on a contract. So on counterparty, the contract is written like that. And another guy came and say, okay, I will give a special character to whoever owns a Satoshi card, so a specific token from Spells of Genesis. So permissionless, he said to the community, he reused our token that we issued, that we put on sale, that we manage as long as they are in our wallet, but once we sold to the user, they have full control. So this way, he attracted the wealthiest player of our community. It's good for him because then he markets his game, but it's also good for us because it gives even more value to our token that we are issuing. So it's a win-win situation. In that case, we have one token, two different assets, as you can see. So one is the official one, I would say, or the one we provided, and another image that is used in his game. And then you can play with the same token in two different games that are completely different. So here, an orb, in that case, for us, would be two orbs. So one token, two different assets, so it would be two orbs. So from one token, you can have two orbs. Another example. So this is something we're working on. It's called Orb Explorer, which is basically an Etherscan, but to put asset first or asset data first. So you see what you are transacting more than the raw transaction that is really geeky, but more what asset I am transacting. So in that example, we have two cards here on two different chains. So one is on Counterparty, one is on Ethereum. And in fact, they are the same underlying asset. So if you own this token on Ethereum or if you own it on Counterparty, you get, in the end, the same asset in our game. So this way, you have two orbs formed with two different tokens and one equivalent asset. So how do we modelize that? So when you want to know, to answer a simple question, what asset do I own? It looks like a very simple question, especially if you work on a single chain and a single contract. But once you go on multiple chain or side chain, multiple contract and multiple standard, it's hard to say what do I really own in terms of asset. There's many protocols. You could use Etherscan, for example. We are working with Matic as well. So if we want to get data, we need to go to Etherscan, but you cannot have Matic data on Etherscan, so you have to reconcile data from a lot of different sources, which become very hard or impossible. So we try to modelize the orb in a way to have a flat or unified standard. So the orb is built from a token contract, a specific blockchain, the underlying asset that is created, and some governance rule. So the governance rule are probably off-chain, it could be on-chain, but what can I do with this asset? So for example, here Satoshi card, it gives one playable card in Spells of Genesis per token unit. So if I have 2 units of the token, I would be able to play this card twice. The thing is, there are not only one standard, there's multiple chain, and to represent this, we need to be generic enough to be able to represent that in any blockchain or any standard. So here, an ERC721, for example, is built in the same way. So an orb contains a contract based on Ethereum. It has an asset, which is the cards that you can play in God and Chain. And there is one additional data, the specifier here, and that's the token ID. If you have an ERC721 contract, it's not enough to know what every user owns. You need an additional data, which is the token ID, that will give you the asset in the end. And another, whoops, okay. I'm missing the 1155 example, but on 1155, it's another NFT standard. It worked the same, simply that on the specifier, you have token ID and token index as well. So in order to find the underlying asset, you need to know the token ID and the token index. This we simplified by calling it the token path. So it's how do I get to the token from basic data. So a hard task is when you want to index like Etherscan or OpenSea or such, you want to know what are the blockchain assets in existence. You don't really have an index, so some people are indexing OpenSea, for example, but they cover only Ethereum main chain so far. So we tried to modelize a way to get the asset from the token information. So in order to get the underlying asset, for example, for a CryptoKitty, you need to know the contract, you need to know the specifier, which is a token ID, you need to bind it to a collection, and this collection will have the governance rules. It will be The collection is usually the game studio who defines that this token ID equal this cat and this one equal this cat. So once you have this tree information, you solve the asset. So you ask the system, okay, now I told you that on this contract with this token ID for this collection, what is the underlying asset? And then you get your CryptoKitty. You could also what we call asset to token remapping. You could also say if you have another game, and you could say, okay, everybody who owns a CryptoKitty in his wallet also own a spaceship in my game, because I want to attract new people, new players who are playing CryptoKitty, for example. So in that case, you will start with the same contract. You will have the same specifier, but a new collection, which will be my space game, for example, and that will resolve to another asset. So in that case, it will be a second orb with the exact same contract and token, but a new orb and a new underlying asset. So implementation. So what we did most of last year, we worked on the libraries that abstract the token from the chain or the path or the sidechain in order to have objects, programmatic objects that I can use for any blockchain or any sidechain. And this is because for Spells of Genesis, we have players who own assets on counterparty that are the old player, and now we're bringing Ethereum asset also, and the game should be able to easily query what does this player own, and without the need to implement each blockchain specification, and also for us to be able to easily connect to partnership with another game which is on another sidechain, for example, and say, okay, we make collaboration characters, for example, without us the need to implement as a game studio the compatibility with each blockchain. So here is a little bit of technical. So we built the library, the dev library, and then we implemented that library into Spells of Genesis, our game, and it allowed us to connect to Ethereum blockchain within 20 lines of code. So the first part, we are reading the balance in a unified way. So I'm getting for all the player address, because he might have a Bitcoin address and an Ethereum address. For each address, I will first trying to guess which blockchain this address comes from. And then when I know, I just do a address get balance. And this will return me the orbs. So from a balance, because I don't want to know necessarily for the game the tokens that the user owns, but I want to know the assets, the orbs that this user owns. So I don't care if it's on this contract or this specific contract, I just want to know if he has the dragon or not. And then here on the orb, I will just say, okay, get me the orbs, and for each orb that I own, whatever blockchain it is, you'll get the asset name and the other data like the power and so forth. So, yeah. So this allowed us to really implement the compatibility within different chain. And as I mentioned, we're working with Matic, and that will be very important because if you want to go sidechain, depending on the technology, but your contract change. So all the mapping that you made for the mainnet asset will have to be remapped on the sidechain. So this way we can work, integrate Matic very easily. And from a visual perspective, so we are building APIs, and we want to streamline the data a little bit like Etherscan, but also with the same idea behind, asset first, but also working on several blockchain. So, but you see as a user the same way. Okay, you transacted this character for this user, and eventually you want to know on which blockchain it happened, and so forth. So that's it for the presentation. We are building it, so I'll be very happy, since a lot of you are technical, to discuss the choice, how you see it, your idea and your input on the question, on the topic.
Questions? Thanks for the talk. What's the range of assets that you would like to represent there? Is it just URLs? Is it something else? And dwelling on that, do you know the concept of DIDs from the identity management protocols?
I'm not an expert on DID, and not necessarily on. We're not trying necessarily to build the standard inside. How do you store the metadata and the standardization? There are already within ERC721 a way to standardize, for example. It's important for us because we want to index the content. It's important for us to get to know where the information is in terms of metadata. And we are open to follow the standards, but also if there is a proposition to make, a better way to make it clear for everyone how to find the path to the data. It is something that's highly interesting for us. But at the same time, everybody kind of implement the way he wants, and we need to reconcile that also in a way.
Hello, I had an idea where people can print on a t-shirt their own CryptoKitties. Is it possible to do it? Because perhaps I stole the asset from from CryptoKitties?
It's a super good question, and I think it has been under-addressed in the field. If you talk about CryptoKitty, they made a license which is called the Nifty license, which regulates what you can really do with the CryptoKitty. And if I'm not wrong, you're able to do whatever you want unless you reach a cap of 100K of sale, I think, if I'm correct. So you are allowed to do whatever you want, printing t-shirts, selling poster, etc., until it reach a certain number. But this is only made by CryptoKitty. And I would say all other projects, Spells of Genesis included, is really unclear what I can do with the asset. Am I allowed to sell it? Okay, but sell t-shirts, derivative, can I use it in my game, for example, just a raw image? And also there are rights that is linked for the artist, for example. In some country, the law for IP are different. In some country, they have the paternity ownership. So you cannot get full ownership of his art. He's still the owner in the end. And there is really important question is, for example, if I buy a token which is an art, there are many art tokens, but if someone claimed that this art was stolen and he claimed paternity, so the buyer actually owned the token, but the platform needs to remove the image because the image is illegal. So who actually take the hit? Am I still allowed to think that I own it, even I purchase it? There is a lot of open question in that field, and I think there are going to be a big challenge in the future as the space evolves.
Hi. First of all, thank you very much for your talk, because I really learned a lot. I think you're great at talking. And one very super easy question regarding that card. What's the law about using other people's names? You know, like, have you done that on purpose because you knew already that you would have faced kind of a trial, or you did that just because you wanted to, like, just simple question?
We like to shake thing up, making noise, but still be compliant. So we don't want to like do complete legal stuff. So that's why here the name has been changed a little bit, but you might recognize it. Actually, it's a little bit hard to say because you can do caricatures of people by changing the name. So that's what we did. But also the space is a super cool space now, and we illustrate several characters, but also project events. For example, we made a card for the DAO hack. No, before the DAO hack, when the DAO was not hacked. And actually, on the card, it was written the DAO is invincible because of the power of all the whatever. And the day after, it was hacked. So it was super funny. So we try to be compliant. We try to be compliant and transparent. This is super important because if you issue on Counterparty and then you reissue on Ethereum, we don't. So we promise a limited supply, but nothing prevents us to resupply on another chain or another contract. And this is also a big problem that we're trying to solve with Orb Explorer. While we cannot prevent people to reissue token on other chains, but we can at least track, say, okay, this asset is present on that chain and that other chain. So we try to be transparent for us as game creator and offer transparency for people who are searching assets.
So it's illegal to use some other people's name?
Yeah, the real name, yes, for a commercial purpose. So if you look at football games, FIFA, they have the license from the FIFA and they can put the real player name, but when other football game come, they have to change the name, and all the players have funny names, so they cannot do unless they're licensed.
Any other questions? No. Okay. Thank you.
Non, non. Donc en fait, ce qui se passe, c'est que à chaque fois, ils viennent soit avec leur slide, soit avec tout le monde entier.